but I had to overcome a ton of conditioning. You have to struggle to be successful, you have to work hard to be successful, not to mention all the scarcity mindset, and add into it the consciousness of the media and the world and culturally and everything else. I mean, no, it was very heavy in scarcity. And so I was looking to ways to collapse time and do things smarter.
Welcome to Everyone's Talking Money, where we get brutally honest about money, mindset, and making life richer. Nona, you built $1 million business working just 1 week a month. So walk us through what that actually looks like and why you say it starts with energetics and not hustle.
Well, let me take you back a little bit. The first business that I built was a part-time, not 1 week a month, but part-time 7-figure business. And that came from a place of struggle. But then let me kind of give you a timeline for how it all evolved. When I first started my very first business, I kind of went out, did all the things you're supposed to do in terms of strategy, the mechanics, the systems, the employees, the hire, the fire, the delegation, all the things that you're told this is how you build a business. And my mentors would tell me, these are the things you do, and coaches. And I did that. And I was putting in, if it wasn't 40 hours a week, it was a lot more, or if it was less, I was definitely thinking and stressing about my business the entire time, maybe 24/7. And in that process, I actually completely burnt out and made a decision to do things different. So the first idea I had was, well, how do I turn this business into a part-time 7-figure business? That was the very beginning of the process. We're talking about a decade ago. So that was the first business I built part-time 7 figures. Then within the next year, I multiplied into 3 other businesses that were generating 7 figures semi-passively. So at the time, it was 4 businesses, multiple 7 figures, learning in the process how to collapse time and how to put in not just the right strategy, but the right energetics behind the process and shifting in the identity along the way. So as I'm learning more and more of that, and now more in the recent years, learning how to really collapse time and tune into what it means to really be a CEO instead of a business owner and, work and just attached to that struggle of hard work. I had this idea a few years ago that I was going to have a 1 week a month lifestyle, which basically meant, how do I generate multiple 7 figures just working 1 week a month? And when I first had that idea and that vision, I actually had a panic attack because my nervous system, as a type A, I got to do the things, and I got to work hard. I was still had my attachments to the struggle or to having to work hard to prove my worth, if you would. Those parts of me were playing really, really loud. And so I go into this panic attack thinking, that is a silly idea. What are you going to do with the other 3 weeks? You can't sit still for long enough to do a meditation or something like that. And so the recognition that I made in that moment was to reduce working hours, to generate more profitability, has very little to do with the strategy you put into place. I think most entrepreneurs who are semi-successful, they know the things they're supposed to be doing. But I think the challenge was more so in who I needed to become in the process to be able to have a vision in which I can have a multiple 7-figure income and have the possibility and the option of really only working 1 week a month and having the freedom to either put back into the business and or travel and or world school my kids or be present or go to lunch or volunteer or whatever it is that you choose to spend your time on. So it started with a vision, and then it evolved into, well, what's the process in which I get to become that kind of CEO?
And what were the businesses and what are the businesses that you're in right now?
Yeah. So originally it started with a private practice of a chiropractic clinic. So it was a pediatric practice. And at some point I transitioned into having other doctors working for me. So that was the very first business. If we don't consider my very first business when I was 16 years old and I had this underground tutoring business, but that's a whole nother story. So the first one was a private practice as a chiropractor. Then I hired on other doctors to work for me, and then I opened up three other locations, three locations separate than this business of weight loss company here in Orange County in Southern California. So that's really how it all got started. And then it obviously evolved over the years in investing in different businesses and whatnot. And currently, the businesses that I have are there, some of them are where I'm a silent partner or I have some investments, but the bulk of the business and what really inspires me are masterminds and memberships and retreats and consulting.
When you said your nervous system was kind of going haywire when you thought of this 1 week a month that you're working, I thought it was you were going to say because we're taught to work, 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 more hours, more money. If you want to have a successful business, it has to be your life, your blood, sweat, and tears. So
Mhm.
it sounds like you didn't just subscribe to that immediately. Like you're like, no way am I subscribing to this.
I've been subscribed to that since probably before I was born. I've been subscribed, and I think this is something everyone can relate to. As a matter of fact, when I built my first business, like before I hit my first seven figures, I completely burnt out. And again, I was like just really working in the business, on the business, thinking about it, stressing about it, completely burnt out. Then I thought, oh, I wonder what it would be like to have a part time seven figure business because then I want to spend some time with my family. But I had to overcome a ton of conditioning that was you have to struggle to be successful, you have to work hard to be successful, not to mention all the scarcity mindset. I moved here to the United States from Iran. My parents are Iranian. I'm Iranian. And I even if you think about my parents' generation, they went through a war. And in war, food was rationed. I mean, they had scarcity around the amount of food, the amount of gasoline they were going to get. You go previous generations, a couple generations back, you're talking about this ancestral, really deep scarcity because of the Great Depression. So these are things that are very real. And then add into it the consciousness of the media and the world and culturally and everything else. I mean, no, it was very heavy in scarcity and the idea or the concept or thought process that you absolutely have to work hard, you have to struggle to be some level of success. But the initial shift happened when I burnt out. I became a mom and it was like you just have to do things differently. You just can't operate the same way. So I was looking to ways to collapse time and do things smarter. So that generated the first part-time seven-figure business. And then fast forward now, when in a few years ago, when I had this idea, guess what popped up? All of those insecurities and all of those old patterns of you what do you know, but like you don't count, you're not worthy if you're not working, you're not worthy if you're not producing, you're not worthy if you're not working hard and struggling and sort of slaving away. So all of that I had to face again in a really big way, and I guarantee it won't be the last time either. It will be ongoing.
You've said this phrase a couple of times, collapse time.
Mm,
What does that mean? I've never heard that before.
good. Okay. So, I'd like to tell a story to kind of because this is where I learned this concept and from a mentor of mine. During the pandemic, there was this show that came out in the United States. It's not super popular, but maybe you have heard of it because you're in the same field. But it was called Undercover Billionaire. Did you ever see that show?
Yes.
Okay. So, just for a frame of reference, there are four billionaires, self made billionaires, I guess. And what they do is they put them in a new city. They take away all of their contacts. They give them $100 and 90 days and a beat up truck or a beat up car. And they have them build $1 million business in 90 days. And I became a little bit obsessed during the pandemic with this show. And I ended up having an opportunity to sit down with Glenn Stearns, which was one of the billionaires. And he's local here in Southern California, where I live half the time. So I went to lunch with him and his wife. I asked all my questions, right? And one of the questions that I had was, why 90 days? He was the first person to kind of participate in this project in the show. And I said, well, why 90 days? Is there a science behind it? Is that how long it takes? Is there something to the 90, or was that just a logistical thing from the show's perspective? And what he said to me was really, really powerful, really simple, but really powerful. He said, well, if they'd given me 120 days to build a $1 million business, it would have taken me 120 days. And he said, if you'd given me 30 days to build a $1 million business, it would have taken me 30 days to do it. Then later, I learned that this principle, literally business 101, is called the Parkinson's law, which is the amount of time that you allocate to getting something done is the amount of time that it takes. Then fast forward, I had my weight loss companies here in Southern California, and the pandemic happened. The pandemic happened. Prior to the pandemic, I had this idea or this strategy that I was going to take my weight loss businesses and I was going to turn them into virtual businesses, or at least have an arm that would be virtual where people could participate, lose weight, have accountability groups and whatnot, and everything would be done virtually so we can expand beyond our local area and into other states. And if you had asked me, I'd kind of laid out the plan and the strategy, and these are the things that we got to do, and these are the people we got to hire to take this business virtual. If you'd asked me how long does this take, I would have told you legitimately it will take 6 months of hard work. I've really focused because there's a lot that goes in the back end to take a company like that virtual. It would take 6 months for us to do it. And I sort of procrastinated. I would do things here and there, hire and fire, and nothing would really happen, right? During the pandemic, we had to shut down. And as we shut down, I go into, all right, well, what are the options? Now is the time to move into the virtual space. It probably took my team, even my existing team, we didn't even have to hire too many people. It probably took us 4 to 6 weeks to launch the virtual program. I mean, this is a process that technically should have taken 6 months, maybe 8 months to get done. And here we are, because we were in a situation where we had to make the changes, and we have 4 to 6 weeks to make this go. We were able to launch the virtual program in about 6 weeks, and that was done. So I think that's a great example of what I mean when I say collapse time.
Because it's almost like if you give yourself more time, you're going to take all of it, right?
Yeah.
Where you know what you want to achieve, and let's achieve it. You're going to have to make decisions faster. You have to work. You're going to have to do all of these things instead of just spreading it out. And then also you catch more momentum with the less time that you have. Where if you give yourself 6 months, you implement one thing, okay, then time goes by. And that makes a lot of sense. This is what I want to achieve, and here's the time frame to do it, blueprint, and here we go.
One thing I want to add about that is, because this has been really powerful for me, is when we say, okay, like from a practical perspective, you go, okay, this project is going to take 3 months, so I'm going to give myself 3 months to do it. My first suggestion is actually to cut that time in half and go, if I were to do this in a month and a half, then what are the actions that I would be taking right now to make that happen? And if you have employees, if you're listening to this and you have employees or other people that you're keeping them accountable, including children even, is to ask them for the same thing. And as you do this, like you mentioned beautifully, you're making faster decisions, but you're also failing a lot faster. So you're not waiting 4 weeks to fail to learn a new lesson. You've already failed in your first week in the process multiple times, and you have pivoted in this process.
So for someone who's been conditioned to believe that they have to work harder or things are just going to take longer, like they may have more of you can't build a business that fast, or you can't do XYZ that fast. That's impossible. For someone that's been conditioned to believe those things, that it takes time and a lot of really, really hard work and blood and sweat and tears, what's the internal work required to trust in a completely different way of operating?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are two ways typically to handle, you know, a what the world calls a limiting belief or a blockage. I don't love that language, but if you're looking at something, some belief system or a thought process that is holding you back, there are two ways to handle it. And I've done both and I've practiced both. But one of them is to go to the root cause, like, how did I pick this up? Who told me? What was the level of trauma that brought this about? Right. And there's power in that, which I think, say, traditional therapy can help with that, or traditional coaching, whatnot. But there's a whole different way of an approach that, in my opinion, at least from a nervous system perspective, actually makes a lot more sense. And this is what I've been able to sort of tap into and master over the past decade, which is, instead of diving into what is not working and what are these blockages and leaning into them and giving them so much of your energy, you could also take a look at what is it that you would like to experience instead, right? So just like, Pavlov's dog, the cookie and the ring of the bell, and then the dog has saliva, so that you've got the cookie, the bell, the saliva, cookie, bell, saliva. And now you take the cookie away every time there's bell, there's saliva. Now, if you replace that with something else, then it's going to be something else. So the idea is not to try to break that old pattern that's neurologically has been in your nervous system because of trauma, because of ancestral, whatever you're carrying of those thought processes, but really focusing on where you are headed and building some neurology around that and getting your brain and your nervous system to feel safe in where you're headed, instead of moving into where you don't want to go. And part of this process is understanding that whatever you have experienced in the past, you are going to experience in the future. So your nervous system will only allow you to experience the things that you have experienced in the past. So, and this is why people get into toxic relationships, or they have specific patterns when it comes to money. They make money, they lose money, they make money, they lose money, or they have what I call just enough money energy, or, they're in scarcity. So if those are the patterns that you have experienced, or your family has experienced, your caretakers have experienced, you're more likely to repeat those patterns, unless you give a different pattern and a different experience to your brain and your nervous system, and then allow your body and your nervous system to live there, to create safety in the nervous system for the level of abundance and the level of freedom. And that is exactly the work I had to do to get my nervous system to go, it's safe to receive, and put in, third of the work in. It's safe. It's okay. You're not going to die. You're going to be okay.
Your work mentions aligning identity, frequency, and vision for financial liberation. So can you break down what each of these means and how they work together?
Yeah, I think what might be valuable is to give you and the audience really the framework of where these things are coming from. So, and this is the process for me. It has been. There are 4 steps that I used when I moved into my first part-time 7 figures, and then more locations, and then now the 1 week a month concept. And the 4 steps I use is, the very first step is having a vision. Like, what does your business look like? What does your work life adventure, relationship, anything that you are working on, but what is your money situation? What does that look like ideally? I call this the unreasonable vision. It could be the unreasonable vision you might have for your investments, unreasonable life, unreasonable business. What does that look like? So when I was looking into 1 week a month lifestyle, I go, okay, in this particular lifestyle, here are the days that I'm working, here are the hours that I'm working, and then creating safety, which basically means, what am I doing on the rest of the time? Because if you don't have a framework for that, your nervous system will go panic. No, you're working the rest of the time. Even if you block it on your calendar, something will pop up and you have to put in the work. So the very first step in the process is having an unreasonable vision for that particular thing you're going after. The second step in the process is expanding your identity, right? The version of you that is creating seven figures or multiple seven figures or six figures, depending on where you are if you're listening to this. So, like your next level, that version, that might be the CEO. It might be just creating more. It might be more authoritative. It might be making decisions differently, might be showing up differently, different level of confidence. So figuring out who is the version of you that is possibly living this whole parallel life of this unreasonable vision. So now that you've created the vision, you go, how do I expand my identity and express more of the traits that are going to be more in alignment with where I'm headed? And how do I express the piece of my identity that are holding me back, such as the part of my identity that, identifies with being a hard worker, the part of my identity that identifies with money is hard, or part of it that's a procrastinator, or I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, or whatever the case is. So expressing certain parts less and expressing certain parts more, but really from a left brain perspective, writing it all out. Who is this version of you that is experiencing that life? So those are the first two steps. So the third step in the process is embodiment. And embodiment is really where you take the vision and you figured out the identity, and then you show up to this beautiful podcast right here, to your emails, to your children, to date night with your husband or with your wife, and you show up as the next version of yourself. So I would show up as if, and this is before I had any kind of freedom, I would show up as the version of me that has freedom. So the version of me that has freedom is not in a rush. The version of me that has freedom has a better relationship with time. Version of me that has that level of freedom is present in the moment, is not constantly looking around and seeing what time, how much time do I have? I got to squeeze this. There's no scarcity. There's no limitedness. I could go on forever in this present moment. So I would show up, even though my bank account, my calendar, none of that was where I wanted it to go. But I would show up as that version in my energetics and in my embodiment of that. So my nervous system would feel really safe and go, it's okay to receive. It's safe to receive. It's safe to also receive joy on top of abundance and freedom. And the very last step in the process is, and for a reason it's the last step, but it's called taking unreasonable action. So unreasonable action, we've already talked about an example of it, which is I got to get this project done in half the time. I got to hire fast. I got to fire really quick. So the idea behind unreasonable action is that these are the actions that the future version of you would take that perhaps you would not be taking, right? Like right now, I would be taking certain actions that have probably brought about the kind of life that I have right now. So if I want a totally different life, I would have to take actions that are in alignment with that kind of life. And if this is done properly, if you really sit down and contemplate, what's the vision? What's the identity? How do I embody this? By the time you get to step 4, those actions are actually not so unreasonable. They are the kinds of actions that the CEO version of you, the 7-figure version of you, the multiple 7-figure, 8-figure version of you would be taking.
When you help your clients reprogram their wealth ceiling, and I'd like you to talk about that for a second, what's usually the biggest identity shift they have to make? And why is identity work more powerful than strategy alone?
Yeah, that's a big one. So I think the best way to explain this is through examples, right? Something I teach is your identity, and there's tons of research around this. Identity drives your behavior. This is, again, tons of research on this. So some really cool research that's actually done around the impact of what they call the possible self or future self, the impact of merging yourself with the future self. But let's just keep it super basic for now. Identity drives your behavior. So if you believe in your identity that you are a fit individual or you're a gym rat, right? You will probably never sit down every January and write out that you need to go to the gym 3 times a week and you need to eat healthy. You automatically go to the gym. You automatically find time to go to the gym. We all know those people, or if you're listening, you might be that person. You identify with that. If you identify with someone who can have a great marriage, you do the things that create a great marriage as a mom in any of your roles. Identify with being a CEO of a company versus the owner of a company or a practitioner or like in it, then you're going to do more things that are like CEO. So your identity drives your behavior. Now, the second part to the equation is, okay, well, if my identity drives my behavior, then what do I do here? I can't break old habits to become the next version of myself. And that's where the 4 steps come in, where you go, okay, here's the vision. What is the identity? And then embodying that level of identity to bring that about. Another example of this is when people say, like in the United States, right? I live between the US and Italy. So half the time I'm in Italy, but particularly in the United States, we have a massive rate of obesity, right? Majority of people in the United States, I would say 95% of Americans, they know what to do to be healthy, right? To lose weight or to be within the right BMI. They know, and I know this because I've dealt with this in years of my business. They know to eat less carbs and more protein and healthier and less processed things and to move your body. So they have the strategy. They have the mechanics that would get somebody to be successful at being healthy. But yet 70% of Americans are overweight. So knowing the strategy is not going to help. What it does help is creating that identity of a fit individual that is going to. Same goes for money. So what's your identity when it comes down to money? What's your relationship like with money? Do you have a toxic relationship with money? What are the stories that you have around money?
You talk often about wealth ceilings. What is a wealth ceiling, and what's actually happening in our brains that keep us stuck at certain levels?
Okay, that's a great question. So I talk about the minimum and the maximum energetically that each person has around money. So if you're listening to this or watching this, once I explain it, you're going to be like, yes, I have a maximum, and yes, I have a minimum. So a maximum is going to look like most likely the average higher end number that you are making. And again, hopefully, if people are in business, they can relate to this. If they have a career, they can also relate to this. But I'll ask my business owners or entrepreneurs, I'll go, what's the most amount of money that you made? And they'll go, as an example, they'll say 100K in a month. And then I say, okay, well, how long was that? They'll say, oh, it was just this 1 month. And then we crashed back down. So that's the top of the ceiling. And then at the, a little bit lower than that ceiling is where you are settled. So then I go, what is the average high that you have? And they'll go, pretty comfortable and consistent at, say, 80K per month, right? So they'll say, okay, we're at 80K. So then I go, okay, that's where your nervous system is comfortable. Anything above 80K and especially 100K, that's where your thermostat is practically set. So it's as if your thermostat's set at 80K. As soon as you go above that, then you're going to drop back down. Now, that's the top ceiling. Energetically, there's a bottom ceiling to this. So if I said, how much do everybody, especially I think business owners, but really everybody has some level of, urgency, money or emergency money or some level of a cushion if you have it in your business. And there's different calculations of what you're supposed to quote unquote have in your business. But generally, different people would give you different answers. Some businesses will go, depending on risk tolerance, they'll go, oh, I just need a couple $1,000s in my bank account and I feel fine. But as soon as it goes below those couple $1,000s, then I stress out. So to figure out what your bottom is, think about what is the lower end of the number. So if you say, I have to have $50,000 in my bank account, as soon as it goes below 50, I start to stress out. That's your bottom number. That's your bottom number. So in order to build some safety around the higher numbers, and then of course get comfortable in the lower numbers, more so the conversation is really towards the upper numbers, there are a couple of things you could do. Okay. So one is have awareness, right? Recognize where the higher end ceiling is and where the lower ceiling is. Now, here's a disclaimer. This is not financial advice. This is absolutely not financial advice at all. This is just my personal experience, and it's worked for the clients that I work with. But if I have a good month that I know for sure it's above my thermostat, let's say if my thermostat, this particular person we're talking about, thermostat set at 80, all of a sudden I have 100K months. My suggestion, if it makes sense to them financially and their financial investor says it's okay, my suggestion is to take the 20,000 out of the visible field. What I mean by that is take that 20,000, put it in a different fund that you can't touch. Take the 20,000, put it towards your mortgage. Take the 20,000, put it towards like a fund or a house or something that it is that you want to buy. What you're gonna know, and actually, I apologize. Not just to 20,000, but go below that level. Go below that level. So like maybe take 25,000, like get yourself a little bit uncomfortable from a nervous system and an energetic perspective, move that into a different account. Every single time that they do this and every single time that I have done this, somehow it just goes right back to that 80,000 or it goes right back to whatever my ceiling was. And the bottom works the same way. So if now in the cushion, maybe my cushion is, just to make up some numbers, I'm supposed to have 10,000, or if it goes below the 10,000, I'm going to start to stress out. And let's say in my cushion now I have 20,000. So I'm going to take the 10,000 or maybe more, and I'm going to move it away. And then pretty quickly the nervous system goes, oh, here's your 10,000. So this is one of the strategies. And then of course, to overcome this, the other strategy is create a vision in which you are generating, multiple 6 figures a month or multiple 7 figures a year. And you create safety around that. You see it in your mind, you feel it with your body, with both the right side of your brain, the left side of your brain. Engage your limbic system and give that to your nervous system to feel comfortable in the higher number that you want to set the new standard for, the new thermostat for.
How does neuroscience explain why we self-sabotage our financial growth?
Well, we self-sabotage our financial growth the same way we self-sabotage any other thing. If you think about it, we, back in the caveman days, we would go out and look for, the women would look for the berries and had to know which berry is the right berry and which one was going to kill the whole family and the whole tribe. And men had to be really attentive and focused and driven and go get the animal and kill and bring the food. And so we are wired for survival, right? We're wired for survival. And if we picked the wrong berry, we made a little bit of a mistake and we picked the wrong berry, our entire tribe would be dead, right? And if the man, made the wrong move, all the men that were out there, hunting, they were all dead. And the family didn't have any food to eat, right? So we are wired for survival. So it's so, when it comes down to taking risks, or even whether it's financial or in a relationship or anywhere else, we are sort of wired to hold back for safety and not, we think about maybe making an investment in which we might lose. We think about our nervous system thinks this is going to kill the whole tribe. Our nervous system is still wired to that previous conditioning. It's not thinking, oh, this is just an investment. What's going to happen? Either I lose it or it's going to work out. Every decision becomes about life and death from a neurological perspective, which makes it difficult to jump in and to do the things. And we're also wired to conserve energy.
So, for someone listening that is an entrepreneur that has their business, or maybe it's a side hustle that they started, whatever it is, and they want to start living the 1 week a month lifestyle,
Mhm,
what's the first energetic shift they need to make right
mhm.
away?
Yeah. I would say define what is your version of a 1 week a month lifestyle, right? I have people, students of mine, where they say, I just want to take Fridays off. That's your version. Like, start there. I want to take off an hour at the end of the shift on Mondays. I want to take off one whole week every month. That's how I started. I want to take one vacation every quarter. So, like, what is your version? What's your next level that feels unreasonable, right? It can't be just like you just go to your business and cut out Fridays and it's easy. You just needed to do it. You've got to pick something that's a little bit more juicy, a bit more dreamy. It's outside of your current identity. So, define what that looks like and then give that to your brain and your nervous system repeatedly. I mean, if there's one non negotiable that I have multiple sort of rituals and habits, just like everybody else. But if there's one that is a non negotiable for me, is reading through my future vision for my version of unreasonable lifestyle. And I've done this to be able to get to 1 week a month lifestyle and reading it and feeling it every single day.